And we're live. How's everybody doing? This is not a planned stream. Breaking news, though. Israel attacks Iran. Some call this retaliation, which it is. But many would call Iran's attack against Israel a retaliation. So again, we're stuck in this cycle of violence and escalation, which honestly very easily could have been avoided. But with the leaders we have, it seems like de-escalation is just not part of how they know, not part of how they know to do things, honestly. We're still getting the report as it's coming in, but let's just give a little background of how this all started. So around 3 or so weeks ago, Israel attacked a building adjacent to the Iranian consulate. Suppose it wasn't the consulate itself, but it was very close, killing one high-level member of the Iran Revolutionary Guard, and I think two or three lower-level members. Iran retaliated against this by sending hundreds of drones and a few ballistic and cruise missiles. Now, many speculated after this attack. There were kind of like two camps. Some were saying, "Oh, look how great Israel's defense systems are. Iran tried to, cause massive harm, and there was minimal harm. There was only supposedly, from what we know, one injury, which was a 7-year-old Bedouin girl." We do know that at least one Air Force base was hit. Minor damages are reporting, but I saw some reports that potentially there was some more infrastructural damage that was not so clearly reported on. So some said, yeah, it's a miracle, or this is clearly testament of Israel's defense. Look how successful our defense was. Others speculated, and I tend to agree with this latter analysis, that Iran had to show strength, right? They couldn't accept that Israel attacked them without doing anything. They're like, okay, how do we create a spectacle in a way that won't be so harmful that Israel will strike back? It seems like the way they did their attack was in line with that. It was hundreds of drones. Yet drones are quite easy to shoot down. And also, I think it was their way to test their defenses. I think they collected a lot of data, as did Israel. Israel collected a lot of data as to the efficacy of their defense systems. And here's actually what we did learn. So a lot of people were saying that it shows how good the defense system is. That's true, but it also shows that Iran does have the capacity to hit targets if they were able from there to hit bases. And this was an attack that was very much expected. It wasn't in coordination with Hezbollah or Hamas. So it just shows that if Iran wanted to, and they coordinated with Hezbollah and Hamas, they do have the capability to hit targets within Israel. So I don't think it's the major win many on the pro-Israel side are making it seem like. But again, there is debate if Iran genuinely tried to hurt Israel, or they just had to save face and show that they're tough by doing something without requiring a response from Israel. Israel very much had the ability to let it go and de-escalate. They did not have to respond. And by the way, neither did Iran. Iran did not have to respond the way they did. And, as of this morning, it seemed like they were not going to respond. A report came out that, the U.S. and NATO forces put a lot of pressure on Israel not to respond. And the deal that at least we heard came out was that the Biden administration approved Israel's plan to attack Rafah. Rafah is the only major city in Gaza that has not been overtaken. There's, I believe, around 1 million refugees there. So it's tactically very hard and will be very bloody to take. So the U.S. has not approved Israel going into Rafah. And this morning, a report came out that Israel would agree not to strike back against Iran if they get approval from the U.S. to go into Rafah. And it seemed like that was an agreement that was made between the Biden administration and Israel. And then out of nowhere, we hear targets hit in Syria, in Baghdad, so Iraq. The first time Israel's ever struck, not Iraq, they didn't hit their nuclear reactors in 1981, I believe, but it's the first time they've ever struck Baghdad. And then shortly after, we did hear that there were at least one strike against Iran. So we're still getting the reports. That's just a little bit of background. We can only speculate as to, why Israel decided to continue this escalation when they're already fighting on three fronts, right? They're fighting Hezbollah in the north. Again, it's not a full-out war with Hezbollah, but just this week, 14 or so soldiers were injured. Andy Martin is asking, were 19 IDF soldiers injured? Yeah, that is a report that came out. So Israel's fighting not only Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in the north. There's uprising in the West Bank. The last thing we need is further escalation. So what does, why would Bibi and the Israeli government, what's their incentive? Why are they doing this? So one way to look at it is they just have this like reactionary deterrent policy, and this very much is embedded within Israel. It's within Israeli policy. If we get struck, we strike back harder. That's always been their policy, and I think by and large it's been a failure of a policy that's caused far more harm than good. But that is not only the policy; it's also a popular policy amongst most Israeli citizens. It very well could be that, or there's some greater strategy that it's often speculated that Netanyahu does want a greater the conflict to prolong, because the longer there's war, there won't be elections. If there's no elections, he can't get voted out of power. So he wants a prolonged conflict. So this may be his way to have a prolonged conflict, and maybe drag the U.S. into it and finally deal with Iran, which is seen as one of the greatest enemies to Israel. So there very well may be. It could just be reactionary, like this is our policy, you hit us, we hit back harder, or there could be some like deeper consideration that they do want this greater regional conflict where the U.S. comes in and helps them destroy the Iranian regime. We don't know what the reasoning is, but it could be either or. Jukoi says we need updates, not commentary. Well, you could just scroll Twitter if you want pure updates, but commentary is a little differentiating factor between here and just a news site, so that's why people tune in. But if it's not your cup of tea, I fully understand that. So Michael, you're saying you don't see anything on the internet. Yeah, let's pull up the reports. So I think one of the first to report on it was ABC News. Oh, but now it's everywhere. Reuters, ABC News. I would just type, if you want to see the reporting, just type in Google Israel strikes Iran. You'll see many articles. But here's the latest report, and I will read Reuters because they are, generally speaking, a pretty fair publication. They're making me turn off my ad blocker, but I hate ads. But then if you put it in incognito, you kind of, yep, that normally works. Cool. As of 2 minutes ago, Washington reports Israeli missiles have hit a site in Iran. ABC News reported late on Thursday, citing a U.S. official days after Iran launched a drone strike on Israel in response to an attack at the Iranian embassy in Syria. Iran's Fars news agency said an explosion were heard at an airport in the Iranian city of Isfahan, but the cause was not immediately known. Several Iranian nuclear sites are located in Isfahan province, including Natanz, centerpiece of Iran's uranium enrichment program. So this is really all. I think this is probably all the information we currently have, right? That there was an explosion at an airport in Iran, in a city, Isfahan, which is a city that has been focus of Israel because of their not only Natanz uranium enrichment program, but other nuclear sites there. There was also an attack in Syria as well as Baghdad. Let's pull up the reports on that. Jukoi, why are you personalizing this to Netanyahu? Well, Netanyahu certainly has a very, very large say in Israel's policy, very large to the point where if he didn't want the attack to happen, it wouldn't have happened. If he did want it to happen, it would happen. So I think Netanyahu is pretty front and center of what's going on right now. Haaretz also reports, similar report from Haaretz. Look, part of the way we get this news really quickly is, crowdsource. If anybody does find new information, either on Twitter or on the web, let us know. I am learning as we go, just like you all are. If anything, you could look at this live stream as a collective effort to get to the bottom of what's going on with some commentary on the side. Shachar Ziv, good to see you here, saying there's now reports in Israeli publications. Can you share one of those? Well, let's see what Israel's reporting on it. Let's see. There's some good Twitter accounts that I generally trust. Let's see what they are reporting. So I'm going through Shael Ben Ephraim, who I've shouted out on the channel on the last stream. He does pretty good reporting. He also seems to have connections within Israeli military and perhaps intelligence as well. So he does get some good information, and he definitely seems to be intellectually honest in his approach. He tweets, the Iranian leadership is meeting to discuss the crisis in Iran. Iran has also stopped all flights, right? So this isn't just a report. We see Iran is taking very real action as a response to what's going on. He continues in another tweet, official Israeli government sources are keeping pure radio silence. That only happens when there's heavy censorship and complete coordination. Anyone who deals with Israeli sources knows how unusual this is. My people love to talk. Iranian state media is reporting that tonight's airstrike by Israeli Air Force may have targeted the 8th Tactical Air Base of the Iranian Air Force within Isfahan International Airport, which contains multiple squadrons of F-14 Tomcat fighter aircraft. Iranian media has also confirmed that the skies over Tehran are closed. So that is what... Okay, yeah, I am seeing it on Haaretz. Let's see. Yep, Times of Israel, Israeli missile struck site in Iran. U.S. official tells ABC News. So yeah, I think, we're now waiting to hear more. It's very clear that, there was an opportunity for this to end after Iran's strike. Very minimal damage. We could have continued on with life as usual, and I put that in quotations because it's not like the situation in Israel and Palestine is good right now, but we didn't need this other front. And now the chance of Iran just accepting this is close to zero, so we can expect even stronger strike against Israel, and maybe even a greater escalation from Hezbollah. Any Israeli that is injured or killed, this is blood on our leadership's hands. It's as simple as that. This very well could have been avoided. There are certain aspects in conflict where you could cast doubt or say, but what could we have done? So I'll give you a clear example. October 7th happens, right? You can make the case that, okay, October 7th happens. This should be an opportunity not to strike back, but to actually use diplomacy. That's a very unpopular position. Many would consider you to be radical or naive. And there's a strong case to be made when you face such a brutal attack. How can you expect Israel to not respond? But for this attack that Iran did against Israel, it was quite minor, right? Not a single person killed. So it very easily could have just been shrugged off and said, you know what, we're moving on. We have other things to deal with. But no, not our leadership. So Andy Martin says, I'm sorry, but there is no way Israel would let 500 missiles shot at them and not do anything. Well, the case could say, well, Iran, there's no way Iran could let, one of their high-ranking military commanders be killed and not do anything, right? Same logic. You could say, there's no reason the Palestinians should live under another nation's military rule or under siege and not do anything. Any action, any act of violence can be justified just by pointing fingers the other way. Well, generally speaking, and this is often we get very blinded when it comes to conflict between nations. But in interpersonal conflict, it's generally perceived as walking away, being the bigger person. That's seen as a sign of emotional maturity, right? When you don't strike back, when you're the bigger person, you de-escalate, right? You walk away. When it comes to nations, that's seen as like weakness. But interpersonal conflict, interestingly, it's seen as a sign of strength and emotional maturity. Well, I think this rule should apply across the board. You don't need to strike back. That's not true. You absolutely do not. We have Scott Holloway telling me to shut the fuck up, that I'm an Iranian bootlicker. You know, it's interesting because depending on what side of the conflict you're on, people seem to perceive me as a radical on both sides, right? Many on the pro-Palestine side might say I'm an Israeli bootlicker. And, you know, I've always taken solace in that. The fact that people on both sides seem to think I'm an extremist means maybe I'm just maybe a bit more moderate than they are willing to admit, or just because they're on the extreme, they view me as an extremist, right? So I generally don't get worked up when I hear comments like that. Anyways, yeah. So, but Scott, you're also welcome on a stream anytime for a chat, you know. But you're gonna need to engage on the merit of the ideas and not just engage in ad hominem. So, he's one of those. He goes, "Where's your boyfriend tonight?" He's not here. You see, it really says a lot. So, not that my personal life matters much, but I'm not into men. But if I was, what would it matter, right? It just shows what a low level human being we're dealing with right now. And that's exactly the kind of person that says, "Oh, when we get struck, we need to strike back." It's these tough guys that are actually really insecure. It's, you know, just a lonely old man who's lashing out because his life's not going the way he thought it should. There's my roommate, Max. Put on a shirt when you walk on screen. You know, we're running a professional program here.
Oh, I thought it was cool though.
No, put on a shirt. It's fine. Yeah. Now Scott is very, very much vindicated. He's like, there's his boyfriend. Anyways, yeah. So Andy's saying that 19 soldiers were wounded. 19 soldiers were wounded by Hezbollah. That's a huge escalation. That is true, but this is an escalation by Hezbollah, not Iran, right? That and again, they're connected, but to then strike Iran is calling in another attack from them. So, and again, Israel's been striking targets in Lebanon daily since October 7th or October 8th. If you're in the northern Israel, you hear them. I have family there, and when I visited them, it was constant boom, boom, boom. Callistos Cali says, "War costs money. Why can't Israel just strike back and save that money?" Yeah, right. That would require rational leadership. Let's see what else we're getting. Where'd our buddy boy Scott go? Did you run off? Scotty, where'd you go? Let's give some other updates. So today, the UN, the Palestinian Authority attempted to achieve full UN membership. 12 countries voted for it. I think it was 3 or 4 against it, or 3 or 4 abstained, and then the United States vetoed. It's annoying. I'll tell you why. Because we always tell Palestinians how, violent resistance is not effective. And we talk about this here all the time. I'd be the first to say that by and large, Palestinians Palestinians' violent resistance has done nothing but cause them more harm. But then when they try means of nonviolent resistance or nonviolent ways to achieve statehood, it's also rejected, right? So when we reject these nonviolent means of resistance or of achieving statehood, all that does is embolden uh, radicals and the support for violence. We need to show that if we're against violent resistance, which we should be, let's show that nonviolent resistance is effective. But when we block that, like by calling BDS anti-Semitic or banning it at campuses or rejecting the Palestinian Authority's attempt to become a full UN member, all this does is say, you see, nonviolent resistance doesn't work either. This just strengthens the radicals. Shachar is updating, saying to abstain Switzerland and Britain. Thank you for that update. World Wide Web says, will giving membership change anything for them? I think, yeah, first of all, it's like legitimacy for them. We need to start to ask ourselves what's actually a plausible outcome. And right now, there's really two relevant leaders for Palestinians, right? You have Hamas and you have the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is a fair bit more moderate than Hamas. And they're much more moderate than they used to be. And this is important to note because many people point to some terror organizations and say, you can't negotiate with them, you can have peace with them, look at them. But organizations have the capacity for change. There's actually been many terror organizations that have been normalized and then have become legitimate governments. So the PA has shown a capacity to transform. Well, I would say a little bit more transformation, and they could actually be a truly moderate, truly oriented towards peace, and a legitimate government of the Palestinian people. And this is something Palestinians need. For Palestine to be a sovereign state, it needs a legitimate government that's accepted by the world. So the world embracing the PA and helping them modernize and become more moderate, I think is a great step. So yeah, I think we need to embrace moderate Palestinian factions. And again, and I would even go as far to say, if Hamas wants to shows that they're willing to modernize and become more moderate, and they've shown before October 7th, I mean, that kind of took them back, let's say, decades. But they redid their charter in 2017. That was a little bit more moderate, and you could just say that was just to fool the world into thinking they're legitimate, right? That case could be made. Their charter still is very much far from where it needs to be, but even they're capable of reform. I don't accept this notion that organizations can't reform, because that's like saying people can't reform. And as far as we know, people are malleable creatures, right? You change the environment, you change the people. So the way people can change, so could institutions and organizations, because those institutions and organizations are made up of people who are changeable. So yeah. Do you believe, Michael do you believe the PA is a genuine partner for peace? Yeah, I think they're a potential partner for peace. Keep in mind also the Palestinian Authority, and they do have some problematic policies, right? Like they're pay for slaves. So a Palestinian terrorist their family would get funding for the rest of their lives. Right. That's a shitty policy that incentivizes terror. Now, Israel does collectively punish that family, so the PA can make the case that this is just to help them out because their home gets destroyed, right? When there's a Palestinian terrorist, the IDF will then destroy their home. So maybe some kind of deal that Israel and the PA can close together is, we will stop demolishing homes and you just stop attacking. You stop paying the families of terrorists. I think that's something that can be done. But yeah, I do believe the PA can be a genuine partner for peace. And again, think of if the international community is involved, if we have other states in the Arab League involved, then certainly this is pressure that could help reform governments. Even Saudi Arabia, right? Just today it came out that Saudi Arabia is still open to normaling ties with Israel. It would require commitment to a two-state solution. But so the Middle East, there are countries that are showing an interest in warming up, but a two-state solution is important to them, or just a solution with the Palestinians is important. So we don't only have the support from Western nations. There's an increased coalition from Middle Eastern nations or Arab League nations that together can put the right pressure both on Israel and on Palestine to make certain concessions, come to the negotiating table, and resolve the conflict. Am I being overly optimistic or idealistic? Perhaps, but what other option do we have? Just drown in our sorrows and despair, right? Like the strongest case for being hopeful is that your chance of succeeding in anything in life increases if you believe you could succeed in that, right? So it's impossible to guarantee what the future looks like, but if we believe that we can actually find a solution, then we're more inclined to do so. And that's true just across the board in life. Like entrepreneurship is a good example of this, right? 90+% of businesses fail, but an entrepreneur believes 100% that they're going to succeed. It requires a level of delusion to think that against all odds you're going to succeed as an entrepreneur. But if you don't believe, you won't even get started. You're not going to take the risk. You're not going to go for it. Adar says, thank you for hosting, and big love from Toronto, Lebanese Canadian here. Good to see you here, Adar, and thank you for the shout out. Hoping for peace with Lebanon as well very soon. Michael says, what would a two-state solution look like in your opinion? So I personally think that I would prefer confederation or federation. I think that the majority of Israelis and Palestinians don't support two states. So let's work with the energy of the populace who don't want a two-state solution. So a federation keeps land whole but divides it. The federation can be seen on one hand as a one-state solution, but it could also be seen as like a 20-state solution in one country or one federation, kind of like the United States or Switzerland. And there's many countries that live in a federated system. I think that might be a more likely outcome. It is unfortunate that there's not much conversation about it, but Israel has the power to actually unilaterally implement that, not in Gaza, but in Israel and the West Bank. But if we're talking two-state solution, again, there's experts, but it would be something along the lines of 67 borders, potential land swaps, some kind of right of return that allows for a reasonable amount of absorption a year. Maybe they're absorbed into the future Palestinian state. Maybe some are coming in Israel proper. You would have, and Jerusalem, I don't know if it needs to be divided as much as it could be just a dual capital. Like, why can't you have the Palestinian and Israeli embassy next to each other, Have them be adjacent buildings. That's what peace is all about. Nader goes, P.S. It was cute to have a shirtless, handsome roommate passed on screen after a homophobic slur. Very timely to alleviate the seriousness of all. Yeah, I agree. Max, the chat says you're handsome. And then Nader continues to go. Is it Nader or Nader? Correct me on that. Says, like the Haganah example of a terror organization was turned into mainstream right-wing politics. Yeah, the Haganah was at one point a terror organization and then became the IDF, which many would say is still a terror organization. So it depends who you ask. Bring back the shirtless roommate. Should we create a Sulha OnlyFans? Is that what y'all are asking for? Some edgy, controversial, racy content that's peace oriented. Because in all honesty, this channel, it's not meant to be focused on that. It's focused on peace. Yeah, once in a while I'll curse, make a joke here and there, but generally speaking, it's PG-13. But if the people request something enough and I see there's a market for it, hey, maybe I'll consider. And in fact, I have a feeling this line alone will make me lose some subscribers. But Few ways can make peace better than Israelis and Palestinians having sex and having children. If you think about it, right? If let's say 50% of the Israeli/Palestinian population were mixed children, then I think we'd have peace at that moment. That's such a taboo concept, though. Fucking your way to peace. We were once at this peace conference, right? So these are meant to be the most open-minded people. One of my best friends in the world who was there with me, he suggested just this plan that we need to start, intermarrying. Everyone's like, no way. There was an outright rejection on both the Palestinian and Israel side. And granted, this was right-wing peace NGOs, so maybe if you had I know left-wing Israelis are definitely on board with it. Peace-oriented Palestinians, I don't know how many of them would be on board with that. I think they're still a little bit more conservative and traditional. Gabby says, what about Jerusalem right of return? I think I responded to that. If you feel like I didn't give enough information on Jerusalem and right of return, please let me know. I will clarify. But like right of return, look, you have 30,000 new immigrants in Israel every year, right? Jews who make Aliyah, around 30,000. I think the number's at like 12 million or something Palestinian refugees. And now, granted, I think the majority won't actually want to move if they had the option to. I think many of them are comfortable in their homes, primarily the ones living in the West. But Israel can't absorb millions of people a year. Just can't even probably reasonably absorb hundreds of thousands. So whatever solution there is, it could be like Israel allows for a maximum of 30,000 Jewish and Palestinian immigrants to enter every year that they can reasonably absorb, and that's a good way to deal with right of return. That also doesn't create too much like demographic concern for Israelis, because that anxiety, like Israelis are not going to agree to a solution that will very quickly change the demographic of the country, or Jewish Israelis, I should say. It creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, and would be outright rejected. Shacha, thanks for the correction. It's 12 million Palestinians overall, 5 to 6 refugees. That means there's around 6 million living on the land. Jonathan says it's comforting to get updates here. Thank you. I think thanks to you. That's one of the reasons why we do what we do. It's not only to inform people, it's also to give what at least I believe to be balanced commentary, and also to help people calm down and relax. It's all going to be okay. People are dying, so it won't be okay for them or their families. So I'm saying that from a place of privilege, but generally speaking, like, the world won't end. We will make it through this. Humanity will persevere. In that sense, it's going to be okay. And there's also, this is easier said than done, but we could get all worked up over what's going on, but us getting worked up doesn't change the situation. It only affects how we're feeling and maybe how we make those around us feel. So our ability to really distance ourselves from the what's going on is important for our own well-being. There's this concept that ChatGPT helped me understand it, but it's something that I personally have had a relatively easy time doing. That's why I think I moderate these conversations and do this. It's that I have a capacity to disassociate from the pain around me. Like, I deeply feel empathy, but I can disconnect from it when it's not convenient. And to be clear, this is in opposition to like sociopathy or psychopathy, which they do not feel empathy, or very little. What I experience, ChatGPT helped me understand it as adaptive empathy, where you can kind of turn it on and off when needed. And I think this is a very, very important skill to hone in on for all individuals, because there will always be pain around us, immense pain, right? At any given moment in the world, there's immense pain. But us feeling the pain of others does not alleviate their pain. It only adds more pain to the world. So if we could all work on more adaptive empathy, I think we'll all have a higher state of well-being. So something worth considering. Israel is a country of Mexicana Jews. Some are more European than anything, at least the ones running things. Skin cancer has been high there. Mexicana, I like what you did there. Yeah, well, I think right now the younger generation is like 50% mixed, like between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi or Sephardic Jews. So amongst Jews in Israel, there's very high levels of mixing, which is great because there is some divide between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi Jews, culturally, socioeconomically, and politically. Right? We've never had every prime minister has been Ashkenazi, but it is the Mizrahi population, and Mizrahi just means Eastern, right? It stands for like Jews from the East. And it kind of gets complicated. I don't remember the exact, like in English, you often hear Sephardic Jews and Ashkenazi Jews. This is like the two categories you often hear of. In Israel, they actually don't use the category of Sephardic. They use Ashkenazi, which is Ashkenazi, and Mizrahi, which means Eastern, which is Mizrahi Jews, which generally, at least in the Israeli category, that encompasses Sephardic Jews, but Sephardic, Sfaradi, just means Spain. So Jews from Spain, Spanish Inquisition, they left and scattered around the world. Many of them went to North Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria. But in Israel, these Jews are referred to as Mizrahi. So just so you're not confused about the categories, there's many ways you could splice it. But in Israel, the two main categories are Ashkenazi. I love how it does the thumbs up when I do that. I did not consent to give that little bubble, but it does that. There's Ashkenazi and Mizrahi. Those are the two main categories. And then you have like Beta Israel Jews, which are like Ethiopian Jews. And then you have some Jewish communities that live in China and India. So there are some immigrants from there. But it's really around like 50-50 or like 48-48 between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi. The breakdown is pretty even. And the younger generation is very much mixed between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi. I hope that breakdown makes sense. Anyways, Gandalf, Mr. Potter's asking what happened. Yeah, for anyone who's just tuning in, Israel struck Iran. At least that's the reports we're seeing. We also saw reports that they struck sites within Syria and Iraq, which is interesting. Let's see what new reports we're getting. Yeah, so this is an analysis by Shael Ben Ephraim. He goes, we don't know all the details yet, but we know Israel attacked in Iran, and we know the attack was targeted and limited, accompanied by attacks in Syria and Iraq. The attack was designed to be a compelling response to the Iranian attack without escalating unduly, right? Which is what we thought Iran was trying to do, and it happened. So we might see this back and forth between Iran and Israel now. No one's trying to escalate too much, minor attack here, minor attack there. Hopefully it does not escalate too much. Hold on real quick. I'm going to grab a beverage. What did I miss? What's going on in the world? Here we have Waterloo. This is one of my favorite sparkling sodas. Orange vanilla, it's okay, but generally speaking, Waterloo is a good company. I know the artificial flavors are questionable in their health, but it's definitely better than like a sugary beverage. And I met the Waterloo team. This is highly filtered water. So fluoride free, heavy metal free. Although I do hear these cans give off some shit, so it's unclear. As we say, l'chaim. Yeah, social surrealist adds, Westerners need to remember that in Israel, racial categories are completely different than white, brown, black people like in the US. Yep, we do have different categories. I believe most nations have their own sets of categories. By the way, if you're interested, Social Surrealist has his own YouTube channel, so you can check that out. And they are related. Let's see if we're getting any updates. Oh, interesting. Did you know it's Khomeini? This is the head of the Ayatollah. It's Khomeini's 85th birthday. Interesting. Well, Mazal Tov, Khomeini. I never like to wish death upon people, but hopefully it's his last birthday, you know? New leadership all around. He lived a long life. Yalla, bye. Next. Carlos Alexander Santos drops a Brazilian flag in chat. Okay, shout out to Brazil. I've been to Rio one time. Rio's great. I'd love to go back. Gandalf Mr. Potter says, if Adar was prime minister of Israel right now, what are you doing? Interesting. Well, because Israel is a democracy, I need to find the balance between taking very bold and courageous steps forward towards a peaceful resolution without freaking out the Israeli public, and without breaking up my coalition in government, because then elections would be called and I wouldn't be able to implement what I wanted to do, right? So I could say what I would do as an idealist, but in all honesty, I would need to work within the political system, and this is take bold in a way that doesn't freak Israelis out. So I would be somewhat limited, but I would start with like a national address, right? Telling the Israeli people that this is a new phase in Israel's history, a new step towards a more peaceful future. And I would tie it into Israeli nationalism, right? People say achieving peace on this land is naive. True. But people thought reestablishing our homeland after 2,000 years in exile was naive, yet we did it. If you will, it is no dream, right? I throw in a little Herzl quote in there. I would speak to the Israeli pride, but also speak to, with that personal responsibility, how the power for change is in our hands. And it also acknowledges some level of not only responsibility, but wrongdoing for things we've done in the past. And then I would present a 5 or 10-year plan towards peace, where both sides would be required to make concessions. I would kind of outline this to the Israeli public, and then I would get straight to the negotiating table with the PA, working with the Arab League and the international community to put necessary pressure for concessions to be made. Again, I'm just flowing right now, right? This is on the spot question, but this is generally how I would go about it. I would definitely change some policies instantly. I would stop settlement expansion. I do believe that Jews should have the right to live in the West Bank, but not when it needs to come at the expense of Palestinians having freedom in the West Bank. Because with our military presence, with the more Israeli citizens that live in the West Bank, the more military presence we need. The more military presence, the less freedom Palestinians have, right? So I would stop settlement expansion. I would stop policies of destroying terrorist homes and many other forms of collective punishment, curfews in either I would replace the military in the West Bank to a police force that was both Israeli and Palestinian, of highly trained, call them peacekeepers, that spoke Arabic and treated both Jews and Palestinians with dignity and respect. I would start teaching Arabic in classrooms, learn more about the Palestinian narrative. They're just flowing with some ideas. So that's where I'd start. And I wouldn't feel the need to retaliate every time. But again, here's where it gets tricky, right? The population expects you to retaliate. So to not retaliate, you become very unpopular. So you need to frame it as to why you're not retaliating. And Gaza is a tricky situation, but I think I would drop leaflets in Gaza every single day. Not saying leave your homes, we're going to bomb you, but talking to the Gazans, telling them how we want to live with you side by side, how we want to build a shared future with you, and start to get public opinion in Gaza to change against Hamas and pro-Israel, right? If they start to see us as their potential liberators and their friends, that in its own would actually pressure Hamas to change, right? If the Gazan population starts to warm up to Israel, then Hamas would need to reform themselves to remain relevant. Again, just an idea, but I would start communicating with the Gazan people. We'd have maybe different culture, like some cultural things like sports days, music that Israelis and Palestinians create together. Building a shared society, a lot of it comes down to shared culture, right? So if we have songs that we all like and sports that we play together, movies that we all appreciate, I think this is ways to build a shared culture. So yeah, vote for me 2034. I'm doing it. But no, in all honesty, I almost certainly will never run for any office. I think there's many ways to impact society. It doesn't need to be within politics. Some of the most influential people are doing it from outside of politics. So I would certainly like to contribute some energy towards doing good for humanity, but I most likely will do it outside of the political system. Let's see. We missed some questions. We're going to do 10 more minutes. We're on 47 minutes now. We'll wrap it up at the hour. Practically anyone can be a Jew religiously, right? Yeah, anyone can convert, can go through a conversion process, yeah. But it's not an easy process, that is true. RFLX asks, so you're anti-Netanyahu and against the right-wing government. That is correct on both fronts. Look, I would like the government to actually have voices from all sides, right? I don't want any people to not have a voice, but I think I wouldn't want it to be a right-wing government. I would be a government that represents all voices and that actually helps pull the population more towards the center and to the left. Gandalf Mr. Potter asks, would you have more power to take those changes you've mentioned if you were instead president of the USA? Ooh, I actually, and I might be wrong about this, so somebody feel free to give a different perspective. I actually think that I would have more power as Prime Minister of Israel than President of the United States. President of the United States, the United States has a much more thorough system of checks and balances, and often you have this like deadlock in between the Congress and the Senate. I even remember Obama, after his presidency, asked him what's one thing he didn't expect, and he said how little I could actually get done, how hard it was to actually make change. I think in Israel there's probably something similar, but not to the same extent. If Iran goes to war, do you think Lebanon and Syria will join them? I think there's a good chance. That happens. I mean, it's tricky, right? Hezbollah. There's been back and forth between Hezbollah and Israel since October 7th at this point, but the Lebanese people do not want an escalation. They do not want Lebanon to get bombarded. So there's a lot of pressure on Hezbollah to not escalate. So I think Hezbollah doesn't want it. And Syria is just getting over a civil war. They don't want it either. But is it possible Iran, being like a major funder and supporter of them, has the capability to pull them into it? It's possible, yeah. I'm not sure what the likelihood is, but it wouldn't be surprising if that's the case. Mary Merchel says, let Jews build the temple. They won't be happy until they do, apparently. Let's rip that Band-Aid off. I mean, I'm down for the Jews to build the temple, but we're just going to need to find a location for that, because right now, there's a different structure on that location, and tearing that down isn't even relevant. There's some people within Israel who are, Jews around the world that support that, but Al-Aqsa and Dome of the Rock are not going anywhere. So yeah, down to build a temple, just where? And look, ideal situation, Dome of the Rock becomes a center for peace, right? It becomes a peace center. And then there could be a temple space there, a mosque space there, a place for Christians and atheists, right? Let it be like the world center for peace. I'd support that, but it's a very holy site. It's a holy site in Judaism, and the third holiest site in Islam. So very, very, even this topic on its own is very triggering for many. Like, we have a Discord server, for those who don't know. Discord's kind of like this community management chat. There's Israelis and Palestinians and people around the world talking about the conflict and stuff. I'll drop a link if anybody wants to join. But I learned this through the Discord, that we had some Israelis that were kind of talking about how to build the third temple, and they weren't being malicious. They weren't saying we're going to take down Al-Aqsa and Dome of the Rock. They were just talking about plans, and Palestinians in the chat flipped out, and we understood then that it's a very sensitive topic for them, because they believe that is actually our end goal. It's to destroy Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa and to build the third temple. So Fafo Law says, if Israel doesn't give some sort of response, isn't that message saying you can shoot 500 missiles at us with no consequences? It's a bad strategy. Well, Iran, that was exactly Iran's logic. They're saying, if we don't strike Israel back for them assassinating our military commander, then they could just think that they could strike our military commander. So this is exactly the logic. It's creating a deterrent, but it's not, because when both sides have this tough guy mentality, they're just going to keep responding. So Iran's not going to be like, oh, we learned our lesson, we're never going to do that again. They're going to be like, oh, you hit us back, we're going to continue fighting. So no, it's a nonsensical plan. In reality, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't tell them they could do that. This retaliation tells them, okay, now we're going to retaliate. This is how we get in these cycles. Both sides think that they're creating some kind of a deterrent, but really all they're doing is calling for greater escalation. And that's actually how it plays out, Anyone pro-Palestinian as well as Palestinians see the IDF as Israeli see Hamas. Yeah, that's true. That's true. For the most part, Palestinians view Israel as a terror organization, and we view Hamas as a terror organization. That is true. And I mean, the amount of harm that the IDF has caused Palestinians, it's not hard to understand how they reached that conclusion. You don't need to be unreasonable or irrational to reach that conclusion. Shachar goes, I know very few Jews who are interested in building the temple, maybe 1 to 3% of the population is my guess. I would probably guess it's higher, just because you're probably not hanging out with many ultra-Orthodox Jews and settlers. I think amongst them it's much higher, but it'd be interesting to see polling on that. Yeah, actually, ASDF has a great point. You won't be able to get Gazans to give up arms unless they see peace work. The West Bank becoming a state and removing settlements could do that and give the PLO influence to move into Gaza. That's a great point. If the Palestinian Authority is proven to be successful through nonviolent resistance, it would prove that nonviolence is the way forward. And to an extent, it is proving that nonviolence is effective. It's proving it, but it's still not convincing enough Palestinians and their supporters, because conditions in the West Bank are considerably better than Gaza, right? Where there's a more moderate government, there's also better conditions. So we're actually seeing that nonviolence is effective to improving conditions, but it's true that there's still settlement expansion, there's still military occupation of the West Bank. So it's not a great situation that you can say, look, the PA proved it to be successful. So I do agree with you. Some race supremacist. We need critical thinking. Says some race supremacist is based on people who have never invented or will ever invent, innovate, create, or contribute, but think they are superior. Yeah, I think you're actually talking about like many white supremacists. That it's kind of like a meme going around. You see like this fat white dude with a swastika tattoo and says this is the superior race. It is true that often white supremacists talk about all the innovation that came from white people and the innovation that came out of, call it white society, but that person as an individual didn't contribute anything to society, right? To, let's say, shine light on both sides. I mean, it's true, and this is why the individual matters more than the group. Doesn't matter what group you belong to, you should treat somebody as an individual and get to know them before making any judgment about who they are. And that should solve all group hate, viewing the individual, right? Even if there's group differences, and there are. Different races, different ethnic groups are not only culturally different, here's the big taboo, they're also genetically different. I have no problem saying that. There are genetic differences. There's certainly cultural differences, but that's fine because it still doesn't tell you anything about each individual. Every individual is different. You cannot know much about somebody just by the group they belong to. So by stopping to collectivize people and really viewing the individual as the best way to stop this group hate. And then the other side of the argument, call it like being, we want to be sympathetic towards the white supremacist argument. They look at what has come out of Western cultures and the innovation and societal advancement that's come out of like Europe and the United States, and they're like, look, clearly there's much more innovation coming out of this part of the world than other parts of the world. So why shouldn't we try to preserve that? And again, this very well might be a result of culture rather than preserving a race. It might be preserving a certain culture which allows for innovation. It's an interesting conversation, one we could dive into deeper at a later date. Chosen ones is also supremacist and racist as it reads. That's what we need critical thinking says. So the Torah says, and again, I'm an agnostic Jew, right? I don't believe that the Torah is the word of God, but it says that the Jews are not the chosen people, that we were chosen to follow certain laws, the commandments that God gave us, that the other nations rejected it and only the Jews were willing to accept it. Which, the story in itself is questionable, because if God is this all-knowing entity, why would it even need to go to other nations if it just knew they would reject it? Seems a little bit like a waste of time. Just go straight to the Jews and give it to them, right? But that's a side note. It doesn't say we're chosen as if we're better. It says we're just chosen to follow certain laws. But it is true that many Jews consider themselves to be the chosen ones, chosen by God. And it is true that, and this is more so true in the religious community, but there is some amount of Jewish supremacy where many religious Jews feel like they are superior or better or different. And let me make something clear. Different does not necessarily mean better. But anybody who says there's not a problem with Jewish supremacy in certain Orthodox Jewish communities, that's simply not true. Most of my extended family is religious. I grew up around a lot of religious people. It's very much prevalent. I'm not going to say it's the majority. I can't put a percentage on it, but there certainly is this notion of supremacy. Now, that being said, how does this actually affect other people, right? Like, I guess you could say, I mean, the Israel-Palestine conflict is certainly affected by many Jews feeling like they have a right to land that others don't have, which is combated by Palestinians feeling like they have a right that Jews don't have. So I don't know if that's Jewish supremacy in the religious sense, as more as like the Israel-Palestine conflict is Jewish supremacy more in the ethnic sense. And then if you have these like ultra-Orthodox Jews in, let's say, Brooklyn or places in the United States, and they have supremacist views, it's like, so what? What positions of power do they hold where they could actually do something about it? Like, how's that actually harmful? It's more like an internalized belief. They're living in their own communities. It's not really having much of an impact. And honestly, I would go on to say, let's be fair. Most white supremacists aren't actually negatively affecting those around them, besides maybe some Twitter comments they make. But most white supremacists don't have all too much power. I don't think white supremacy is nearly as big of a deal as many on like one section of the left make it seem to be. Anyways, we're going to wrap it up. That was a fun stream from Iran to Israel-Palestine to white supremacy and supremacy in general to Israelis and Palestinians intermarrying and having children. Yeah, we touched on that. We will continue. Look, depending on what goes on, I will likely do another stream tomorrow. Hopefully, Tal Hagen joins us. Tal always has a lot of good insight, but we'll do another stream. We'll do another stream, and yeah, we'll update you all. So, friends, thank you for tuning in. Stay safe. Well, talk to you soon.